The lights are going out, and along with it, the heat and electricity to power your phone. Being real, here in the Dark Ages, you wouldn't have a phone. You'd wake up to the morning call of a rooster and the light of day. No comfortable bed, no Wi-Fi, and no flushing toilet. The Dark Ages, which occurred from the 5th to the 10th century, was a time of survival, no matter what your class was. The Dark Ages included unfriendly obstacles for a spoiled lifestyle, like Black Death, poison, starvation, violence, and basic bad leadership. This part of history, which took place after the fall of the Western Roman Empire, was an endurance test for all who lived through it. Let's take you through it to see if you could last 24 hours in the Dark Ages. Waking up on the barn floor. It's likely that you'd wake up naturally with the birds if you were living in the Dark Ages, so there's no need for a smartphone alarm. You may have some chores to do depending on your caste in life, but chances are you'd be waking up in a bed made from straw under a thatched roof. You probably have body aches even if you're in your 20s, because during the Dark Ages, that would be considered old age. That's right, most men died around the age of 27, while women had an average lifespan of 33 years. If men weren't off fighting in a war for an incompetent king or queen that ruled your area, you would have the luxury of eating some stale bread for breakfast. While some may think the Dark Ages were a time of nothing but war and death, it was actually a very progressive time. Christianity was rising in power and agriculture was advancing. Math and science were advancing, and the world was changing with the Charlemagne and Carolingian dynasties in place. This was a time of transformation for those who lived during this time. If your morning bread doesn't kill you off, we'll explain more about this later. Middle of the day. Instead of looking forward to your afternoon coffee break, you're on guard in the full swing of the Dark Ages. Death was waiting, always, with barbarian invasions that could happen any place, any time. The good old repercussions of the fall of the Roman Empire resulted in unrest and medieval violence. The barbarian invasions impacted politics and social aspects of European life as groups like the Visigoths, Vandals, and Huns were invading and settling. So your farmland, where you just so happen to grow crops for the landowners, would need to be protected. Every day there could be someone raiding your home, or you could witness a fight in your backyard. There was always the fear that Vikings may invade if you lived any time from the late 8th century to the 11th century. This was the case if you happened to live in a coastal region like Ireland, Normandy, or Iceland. Vikings didn't ask nicely if they could settle on your land, the way that guy you knew in high school does today with his van living lifestyle. No, the Vikings would kill you and your family and just take your land away. While Vikings do get a bad rap for the barbaric actions, you weren't safe anywhere. If you happened to live in the British Isles, which came at the end of the Dark Ages, you probably didn't make it far in life. This is thanks to William the Conqueror, also known as the Duke of Normandy. The Norman invasion caused a lot of deaths, and you may have been a part of the resistance in the north. In 1069, northern rebels slaughtered the army he dispatched, so William destroyed any resources in the area. This led to a horrendous famine to the point where people became cannibals. Right, so if you happened to make it to lunch, it was a modest meal and would usually be whatever was left over from last night. However, you need to be careful, as St. Anthony's fire could be your end. In the bread, there was often a fungus in grains that was aptly named St. Anthony's fire. This is because the symptoms included a burning of your limbs. While the fear was real, food was essential for your survival, so you take your chances on getting sick and dying. Even the royals were not immune to getting a bad batch of bread. Your less than lazy afternoon. If you haven't died from your early day meals or been mauled by Vikings, there's another danger lurking. The battle against persecution and prejudice were a part of society back in the Dark Ages. Pope Gregory, for example, set out policies that marginalized or converted you against your will if you weren't for the Catholic Church. If confronted about your religion, you had a few terrible choices. You could bow down and convert, become a slave, or face consequences, which pretty much involved you dying. As you slave away in your field with barely any food to digest, you might think about running away from it all. It sounds good, right? When we consider what a spiritual retreat is for us in modern times, well, you can forget that because a pilgrimage was a risk in itself. Bandits and disease on a road trip would be just a few concerns to deal with. If you happen to start feeling a little under the weather, it could be exhaustion from the life of suffering you've experienced so far, or perhaps something more sinister. You may just have lead poisoning, which is quite common in the Dark Ages. There was lead in everything and nobody had a clue that it was killing people slowly. Then there was the bread or malnutrition that would make you feel ill. Whatever your symptoms, the treatment for most anything back in the Dark Ages was bloodletting. This was more of a suicide than a cure, as it could end your life more likely than offer the cure. The medical system certainly wasn't what it is today if you consider that 30 to 50 million people died of Justinian's plague, which could have been treated by modern antibiotics. Dinner time. At the end of the day, when the sun goes down, it's time to enjoy a simple dinner like a stew. If you're lucky, you'll eat by candlelight in a dark, dingy room. Your source of heat will be a fire inside your abode, which leaves it smelling dank and creates stagnant air. While you eat, there is still a threat of violence that could happen at any time, so you'll probably eat quickly. Making it to this time of the day is a huge feat and should be celebrated. Unfortunately, it won't be with a nice glass of wine because you're probably not rich enough for that. After dinner, you may want to secure your hut in the event that there is a raid. While there was a constant fear, lords of the land took a large portion of your crops for payment, and it took a lot to survive, there were still things to be thankful for. Perhaps things we are missing in the modern world, like a strong sense of community that you needed to help you survive. You would be close-knit with neighbors for protection and support. Resources were shared, and a communal fire would burn in the village you were a part of. There simply was no evolution of loneliness during this time. End of day. The end of day and the time to get some sleep would come as a relief, but there was much to fear from the dark of night. In the Dark Ages, people were highly superstitious, and there was belief of creepy spirits that came out at night. These beliefs were perpetuated by a lot of village talk, and things that perhaps were just natural became supernatural due to ignorance. I mean, let's face it, for those who didn't have the internet or education, a volcano eruption would look like a fiery demon looking to destroy all living things below it. Be happy as you put your head down on your pillow made from straw that you've made it this far. Only a small percentage of babies that were born would live to an age where there was a concern of dying from things like lead poisoning or a barbarian attack on your village. Statistically, 1 in 4 babies that were actually born would die within the first year, while kids between 1 to 4 had a 12.5% chance of dying. If you made it to middle age, about 14 years old, that would make you a survivor in our books. There is no pillow-top mattress that awaits you. Instead, you'll be laying on a straw pallet in the corner of a dank room. You'll be sharing the space with family members as well. The romantic side of the Dark Ages is the quiet nights with no electrical sounds or lights. The stars weren't interrupted by light pollution, and there was no noise to disrupt the sounds of nature. To be alive during this time would bring a new sense of gratefulness in a way, because you had to struggle to survive. Simple things like a brilliant sky full of stars would mean more. Life was organic and simple with very few complications. The Dark Ages were a difficult time, full of hardships, but it was also a beautiful time in the quiet moments where your life wasn't in acute jeopardy. It's hard to imagine a life full of so many discomforts, but there's a part of it that perhaps we miss today. The simple life in nature with a tribe around you for safety and support. Thanks for watching another show of History's Weirdest. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Cheers!